the second from the left in the brown hat. I went over there and looked at Phil Veal, right? He was the head man, and so I told him if he came to Tevis, I would chauffeur him around and take care of him. So that's been my official duty this year.
Wonderful official duty.
So they've got a pretty good exchange. This is he's the third Australian Baptist.
Medicare was for sure than mine.
Really?
I think I drank her already.
Funny group today. We're tired. We were funny. That's about as funny as we can get.
My truck, go in. I drove your truck.
Up to the cemetery.
Yeah, up to the cemetery. And you had that bad clutch in that truck, remember that? I had a hell of a time driving it.
That was Wendell's truck.
No, it was an old International. That was your truck.
That was my truck.
Your old International.
But we took the horse out in Wendell's.
Yeah.
Right, the International.
No, this,
the
this
one
was
with
the day of the
bad
ride. Yeah, this was the day of the ride.
Yeah. Okay. Many years ago, Ina Robinson, Wendell's niece, and I, our job was to drag the canyons, clean the sick horse and debris out. We started down into El Dorado Canyon and told Ina, wow, this is a cakewalk this year. We'll be in Mission Bluff pretty soon, and I'll have a few beers, quite a few. Well, we got down to the spring there, and we discovered that a horse had gone off the trail, rolled down. So, oh boy, so we got, and the horse was ridden by Cliff Lewis of Nevada. He was a tough little guy, and he was okay. So we went down to check on the horse, and then the horse was a bad horse lunge, went over backwards.
Just look at me.
The what?
Look at me.
The horse went over backwards, fell a great distance, wrapped itself around a tree, fell down unconscious. We were really upset, and Ina held the fort, and I raced into Michigan Bluff. And at that particular time, a very young Bob Bushnell was a veterinarian, Wendell's nephew, and a very young guy from the neighborhood, Bobby Dryden, who was a doctor. And they got back to where the problem was, and we're having a problem. Wendell came down, and we're trying to figure out what we're going to do. The horse was laying there, and Wendell told me, "You'll stay with the horse, won't you?" And I stood up square and answered in the usual manner, "Yes, sir," and stayed with the horse.
When Wendell spoke, it was yes, sir.
Right. Anyway, Bob Dryden, Bob Bushnell, both very young but very, very competent doctors of veterinarian medicine and medical doctors. They examined Cliff Lewis. He is okay. The horse was in question. So I spent the night, and then at that year, Sports Illustrated was covering the ride, and all over. These were in the solid years when the ride was, some people liked us, some people didn't like us. This was in the years when Dr. Barsaleau had come up from Visalia and made the ride respectable, and everybody started liking us. But the horse was there, and the horse recovered. And so we had to take some further action. Sports Illustrated people came sliding down the side of the cliff. By this time we had a rope down to get up and down, and asked Wendell, "What are you going to do now?" He hoisted his pants in the usual manner and said, "We're going to take it out by helicopter." This was before the Korean War, when they weren't really into helicopters, but they had these big cargo helicopters in San Francisco. So Wendell said Wendell paid for everything too back in those days.
Leave it to Wendell.
Leave it to Wendell. But anyway, we built a barrier, the horse recovered, and Dr. Hank Cook came on the scene with his helper, and then Phil Garner, and I got some more to say about him. He was one of the volunteers who came down for us. We had quite a crew. And then more rocks coming down, and here's guys like him, the television people from Sacramento were there, and we didn't know what was going to happen. This had not been done before. They had given us whatever material they could, and David J. was there, and we rigged the horse up, and then here came Wendell in this big chopper. Helicopters and cliffs are not compatible. So he was throwing notes, we were cutting brush, trees, and everything else. And alongside of him there was this, and Wendell was up in the cargo helicopter directing. He was right there sitting on the edge of it, directing the action. And here is this little chopper up there, Sports Illustrated, photographing everything. And then we were getting ready. Dr. Hank Cook was there. He tranquilized the horse. We were getting it together. More rocks came down on us, and here came the television people from Sacramento. And they photographed it. The chopper came in. We hooked the horse. The horse went out and dropped like a rock, came up, floated up to the ancient cemetery there. We came out, loaded the horse into Wendell's truck. Phil had driven my rig in, and he was one of the volunteers putting his time in there. We drove into Forest Hill, where we stopped in front of the Forest House for some adult beverage. We were kind of parched. We went in, and at the evening news, we watched it on TV, and that's God's truth.
All's well that ends well.
God's truth. But another time, I was cleaning the canyons, and something was happening the night before, and I got into Robinson Flat and got my big old horse ready and saddled. No bridle. Phil was there, and he loaned me his bridle. I returned it. But that was our experience taking the horse out. And we had a couple of wonderful young men from the Forest Service there helping us. Phil was there, Dr. Hank Cook and his helper, they were there. Were you there?
I wasn't there, no. But the horse's name was Kaput.
Oh, yeah, the horse's name was Kaput.
And he almost was Kaput.
He almost was Kaput. And Lewis,
he was okay.
Lewis was okay, and got the horse out, and they turned the horse out in the desert again in Nevada. That was an experience.
Kaput was a dude horse. Worked on a dude string.
But Dr. Barsaleau brought sanity and proper veterinarian care to the horses to the ride. Marion, Wendell's granddaughter, she's a 1,000-mile buckle, won the ride, and her contributions have, you can't tell it.
Well, she's our president of the Robie Foundation.
President of the Robie
This young lady here.
But my ride win was in 1969. That was 40 years ago.
She won it.
It's a long recall, isn't it?
Long time ago, but I can still remember parts of that ride.
Well, tell us about it.
And we have this wonderful lady alongside of you, Kate, chronicling the ride for posterity. Wonderful rider.
Let's hear about your ride.
Well, that ride, it takes too long to tell it, but I would like to talk about Buffalo Bill, another Nevada horse. Buffalo Bill was picked up by the dog pound, the animal police in Reno, Nevada, and they boarded him at Nick Mansfield's 102 Ranch, just outside Reno. And after a month, nobody came forward to say they owned the horse, so Nick took the horse in lieu of Board Bill, and that was Buffalo Bill.
What was his breeding?
He was a thoroughbred and a quarter horse, and he
saw
had
Morgan.
many.
I said Morgan one time on
Yes.
one. Nick
Nick
ridden
just
it.
wrote down whatever breed he was thinking about at the time, and no one knows what breed he was. But he was a tremendous horse. He didn't look like a whole lot, but I tell you, he just went down the trail.
Can you describe him?
He was very, very sound. He was a bay gelding, and he was you wouldn't think much of him when you saw him, but when you know that he did the first 10 rides in a row, 10 100-mile one-day rides in a row, plus he started in Reno the day before. Nick had heard about this ride last minute, and he called home and he said, you know, bring Bill in when I get off work at the Mapes Hotel. He just rode him to Tahoe City, which was about 60 miles. He gets into Tahoe City, and they looked at the horse, and he started, you know, a few hours later, and he finished the 100-mile one-day ride. Nick was quite a horse, and he just trot.
Nick had a couple of good horses. He had a horse called Kit Carson.
Kit Carson was good, and Tippy. Tippy is the one that when in '69 Johnny Curtis rode Tippy.
Yeah,
Tippy
Curtis
was
boy.
half Shetland and half Arabian.
He was just a little bitty horse.
Tiny horse, stood maybe 13 hands, a little less, and my horse was 13 hands, a little more, maybe 13.2. And those horses came in together that year. The thing was, it was extremely hot, and they had a very high attrition rate that year. It was the little horses went on, and the good big horses kind of went by the wayside. But Tippy was a typical Nevada horse in that he trotted down the trail or galloped down the trail and just didn't stop. But Buffalo Bill was quite something. When he had done it 10 times, they brought him into the, I guess it's the Sierra, the Sierra building where we were having the banquet. And they brought him in and they presented him with a halter with his name on it and said 1,000 miles in 10 days. And so he was the first 1,000-mile horse.
Yeah.
And that was
That's so good.
that. Now you got to vet him. What did you think of
I
him?
made a motion that we give him the first 1,000-mile award too, because nobody was near him.
That's great. Well, you vetted him. So what
yeah.
did you think of him?
Well, I thought he was kind of hairy mostly. He was
Kind of hairy.
Nick didn't groom for the show. He groomed for the utility part of it. That horse had a steady trot. Mm-hmm. And Nick used him a lot. He got a lot out of him.
Nick won the Tevis Cup with him in 1969, won the first Tevis Cup. And I had the pleasure of guiding him in from the last vet check into Auburn. And that year, Wendell thought I was going to guide him in. I didn't think he needed any guiding, but he got lost and didn't finish until about 7:30 in the morning. But Nick won the Tevis Cup that year with Buffalo Bill, and we just trotted. We just trotted on in, and Nick made a comment. My horse spook on No Hands Bridge. No Hands Bridge didn't have. It
No
was
rails.
straight across, no rails, straight across it. That curb was even with the bottom part of the base of the bridge.
12 feet
straight
across.
And my horse, boop, leg over the edge, and it was quite something. To me, that was just normal riding.
It's a wonder Marion didn't get gray hair over that one.
Well, that's how I rode. I liked horses like that. And Nick said he had his heart in his mouth the whole way. But he was the first winner of the Tevis Cup. So Buffalo Bill is the foundation of this sport, and I think we should honor him.
He's a great individual. Great.
Dick, could you tell us some story from one of your favorite rides?
My highlight has to be the 3 horses. I rode a 5-year-old mare named Sabur, Savvy of my own breeding. The first year I rode the Tevis, and she finished 15th out of 29 horses. Well, lo and behold, I bred that mare later, and she produced my 1980 and 1978 Mosa and Cajun. And that's the only mare that I know of that's done the ride and produced 2 off the string that got buckled as well.
Well, I beg to differ, Dick, because Mala was first the third and fourth years, and she was the dam of Chief of Tamaroo, who won in '62, and the dam of another horse. Can't remember it, but Capella. Capella also was out of Mala, and both those horses were by Bandos, who won. Who was first the first 2 years.
He sired a number of.
And he sired
offspring.
Siri, who was the second Haggin Cup winner, and he sired my Tevis Cup winner Hyla.
Yeah.
And he sired many top 10 horses. He was the grandsire of Roland.
Siri was a great trotter. He was wonderful.
Siri unfortunately was murdered by someone who poisoned him, and just like about 3 or 4 months after the ride. That was a very sad thing, but he would have made a wonderful sire. It's a shame when people do those terrible things, but still have to go back to Buffalo Bill. He was good in just, you know, saved by the dog pound.
Well, he was a gelding that he really got out and did it.
Yep.
He really did.
So
10 minutes left on tape.
So Dick, tell me more about the horses you rode and finished on, and any experience, any funny story you had along the way on Tevis. I'm sure Jack can prompt one.
Talk about good trip.
Well, Good Trip was an Arab standardbred cross, and Charlie Barrio took a spectacular picture of her and I on the rock, Cougar Rock. But she was had a machine-like trot, and if it hadn't been for the Fitzgerald horse, the Widow Zarf, I would have thought she was about the best trotter I'd ever seen. But Widow Zarf had a trot like pistons, and I ate a lot of his dust in the years that he was winning the Tevis. He won 6 in a row.
He won 6 in 7 years.
Yeah.
1 year he didn't win.
He was very impressive, and yet he was just a very nondescript gelding. If you looked at him out in a corral full of gelding, you wouldn't have stood out at all. But once you got behind and started eating his dust, you knew you were following a horse.
If you were running first on a 100-mile one-day ride and Widow Zarf was within several hours of you, you probably were not going to win. He was that kind of horse.
He was a great finisher. A great finisher.
Jack, I can tell that you have a story that will prompt some memories with Dick.
1956, the first guy into Auburn came in last. In 1956, I rode with Reynolds and Eves, Ina, Barbara Radcliffe, and Jim Halsey at Sacramento. We trained together and rode together. And Wendell, of course. In those days, we carried the mail, a big, heavy mail sack. We got to Michigan Bluff, and Wendell's horse had a problem, so he said, "Jack, you'll carry the mail, won't you?" And I answered in the usual manner, "You know what that is?" "Yes, sir." Put the mail on, and we took off together, the 4 of us, you know, we were companions, and Halsey was riding a quarter horse, and it was a good quarter horse. And Dick, "Jim, your horse is in the best shape. You take the mail. You're coming in first." He said, "Sure." He got to Auburn first, got hopelessly lost. Will came in, and he came in last, much last. True story, 1956.
He got lost on the streets of Auburn.
He got lost on the streets of Auburn. It's all dark. This is 56. It's a little town, no lights, no nothing. True story. And Ina's still alive. She's still alive. She and I are both still alive.
Ina was quite something. In those early days, many of us went on to get more than one buckle. We would get buckle after buckle. And I asked Ina one time, "Ina, how come you only did the ride once?" And she said, "Marion, I only need one buckle to hold up my pants." And I think that says it. That says it.
She was tough. But
I thought she was quite something, but she had her opinions.
Didn't she name the No Hands Bridge? Didn't she have something to do
Ina
with
used
that?
to like to gallop her horse across No Hands Bridge with her hands out like this and the reins just over the saddle. This was before we ever started the ride. And she'd gallop across the bridge like this. And Betty Veal used to call the bridge Ina Robinson's No Hands Bridge. Oh, Ina would say, "Look, Ma, no hands." as she galloped across the bridge.
There was no railing.
No railing, straight across. Your horse loses himself over the edge. That's it, you're gone. You're not going to come out of that.
Paige Harper came galloping past me on the bridge, and I was riding a 5-year-old mare up on a training ride, and I thought I was going to go with her. The mare was more afraid of the height than she was of that horse galloping by her.
Oh, yeah.
So
Well,
I
you-
lucked out.
You know, Wendell told me one time that, I guess he told somebody else and I heard it. He said, you know, your horse is not going to commit suicide. So don't worry about it, just ride him. And I think that's good. That is good advice to people. It usually when a horse falls or something like that, what happens is the rider gets scared and makes the horse do something stupid. Horses are going to naturally commit suicide.
Dick, can you tell us about being one of the very first veterinarians on this run?
Well, I wasn't one of the first. Actually, Dr. Bushnell and Dr.
Dr. Bullock?
Goulding and Dr. Bullock and Dr. Weed,
Yeah.
they were all preceded me, but they hadn't had the problem with the state humane organizations that were trying to stop the ride. They were really trying to stop the ride, and I spoke up against that and invited the humane officers to work at our elbows during those years I was the head veterinarian, from 62 to 66. And in 64 I wrote it, and I also welcomed them then. I know that the man from San Jose was the one that was especially adamant about seeing that the horses were treated right, and I just had him ride with me all day. At the end of the day, well, they couldn't
Hold it
get
a
in.
second.
Then Dick, if you could talk about developing the criteria for the Haggin Cup.
Well, the important thing was that we were looking out for the welfare of the horse, and so far as demonstrating the willingness and ability to go on. That later got corrupted to fit to finish, but I decided that if you have the willingness and the ability to go on, then you were covering all the bases of the physiological parameters, you know, hydration, capillary refill, mucous membranes, and gut sounds, and of course they trotted sound. And if they didn't trot sound, they weren't permitted to go on. Although several people resented that in those days. Pat Fitzgerald didn't like me at all.
Jack, do you have any other stories you want to share in the moment?
I want to talk to you after this, so I got some material for you.
Okay, great.
Wonderful material.
I can tell Marion still has a story here.
I do have a story. The ride I remember the most, and most people remember their first ride. That's the one that they remember. And I can even tell you the time that I finished it. In 1958, I rode Maya, and we got into Robinson. I was 12 years old. We got into Robinson Flat, and the ranger had left one of those metal 5-gallon milk cans full of nice water from the Robinson Flat spring, and that's the best water in the world. I'm a water connoisseur, and I just love that Robinson Flat water. And he left it there with a dipper hanging on the edge of the porch of the little cabin that was in Robinson Flat. So we got in there, and we didn't know what to do because the vets weren't there. And so we didn't carry canteens in those days. So the first thing to do was get a drink of water, and I thought, you know, I think I'm going to take the saddle off my horse while we wait for the vets. And so I took the saddle off my horse and the one off my grandfather's horse, and took him in, let him eat some grass, and eat some water out of a creek that actually went into Robinson Flat. And so at any rate, we waited an hour. The vets didn't come, so we saddled up and left. The same with Michigan Bluff. We went into Michigan Bluff, and no vets again. And we were concerned about that fact that the vets weren't there. But we were riding too fast, very, very fast. Ended up, our total time of riding time and the 3 vet checks of an hour was 21 hours and 14 minutes. We finished at 2:14 in the morning, and that was speeding all the way. and it was quite something. We got in, so at Michigan Bluff, we got in there. I took the horses out, and everybody went into Bonnie's Ritz cellar, and I couldn't go in because I was a little kid. So I had to stand outside and hold my grandfather's horse and my horse. And so I looked around, got him some water, and some man had a hose, and I just took a shower with a hose there with my clothes on to cool down, and then drank the water out of the hose. I don't know if it was good water or not, but it sure tasted good in Michigan Bluff after a 66-mile ride.
That was a hot spot.
Yeah, that was a very hot spot. So we saddle up and go on from there, and we get into Horseman's Park, and there everyone is having a banquet. They had steaks and everything, and I wasn't too concerned in steaks. I just wanted to get some fluid down, and they had some orange juice there, and I'll tell you what, that was the best orange juice in the world. So I drank a bunch of orange juice, and there were 5 of us. It was Wendell, Buck and Marcia Anderson, and Drew Barner. It was Drew's first ride. And Marcia Anderson had had a baby about 2 or 3 weeks before the ride, and her bottom was sore. And Buck Anderson ate a steak and drank some beers, and so then he started vomiting. And we get down the trail a ways, and it was at American River, where American Canyon comes into the American River. And we crossed that, and then Wendell said, well, I've got the mail, I got to get to Auburn, because the other people were going too slow. So he takes off, and he said, get him into Auburn before 5 o'clock. And these people wanted to walk. I'm 12 years old, and it was like dragging an elephant who wanted to go the other direction. It was the hardest thing I did in my entire life, to drag those vomiting, sore bottom, and Drew's horse was tired. We had to get him into the trot. Get him into the trot. Trot, 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 trot. No, we can't. My stomach is sick. Oh, my bottom is sore. Oh, my horse is tired. It was terrible. Drew actually was as verbal as the other 2, but they were belly aching all the way to Auburn. And Buck Anderson, here he's a bank executive, and he, 12-year-old kid, he says, how much farther? And we go 100 yards down the road, down the trail, how much farther? And I would say, it's just a little ways, just a little ways. And finally he said it, and I'd had enough. Oh, I'd had enough, and I finally said, if we don't start trotting, we're going to be out here for the rest of our lives, and we're never going to get to Auburn. And they realized that they'd hit the end of my string, and they did a little more trotting, and we made it in the astounding time of 2:14 in the morning, and that was almost record-breaking time. Except Wendell had gotten in at probably an hour and a half before we got in. That is my memory, and I can probably remember it to the day I die.
Bravo, Marion. That is absolutely incredible. Is there anything else you'd like to add? I mean, this is such a wonderful, treasurable moment.
Well, when you guys come down to my place, I'll probably think up a few more.
Okay, that'd be great, Dick. That'd be great.
And Jack can maybe come down at the same time.
That'd be wonderful. And Marion, if you'd like to join us, that'd be wonderful too. Because this is exactly what I was hoping and praying for. And I really, really honor each of you and thank you all so much. And to have you all together and have this chemistry and this catalyst for each other is really, really.
Well, I'm glad I got straightened out on the brood mirror.
Yeah, there you go.
I thought that I had it cornered, but I guess it was two mirrors that did it.
Oh, Mala did it, and she did it with a Tevis Cup winner.
My mirror was 15th, I think, out of 29.
Thank you ever so much. Truly. You're all raconteurs. It's wonderful.